Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. We all drink it and bathe in it, but how much do we really know about water? Today, we're going on a deep dive into the surprising world of healthy water and tackling some common misconceptions along the way. Our guide for this journey is Dr. Martin Fox's book, Healthy Water for a Longer Life.
It's amazing to me how many myths exist around something as basic as water.
Right. You'd think we'd have it all figured out by now. We all know we need to stay hydrated, but the book dives into some pretty interesting ideas about what makes water truly beneficial for our health. So are you ready to bust some water myths?
Absolutely. I think we'll uncover some surprising facts today.
Okay, let's jump right in. One of the first things that struck me in the book was this idea that not all water is created equal. I have to admit, I always just assumed water was.
Oh,
What water? As long as it's clean, does it really matter where it comes from or what's in it?
that's a very common misconception. But the truth is, the composition of water, especially its hardness, plays a significant role in our health.
Okay, hard water. So we're talking about those pesky mineral deposits that leave stains on my faucets. Is that really something we should be striving for?
Well, those stains are certainly a sign of hard water, but they're pretty minor inconvenience compared to the potential health benefits. Hard water essentially refers to water with higher levels of dissolved minerals, primarily calcium and magnesium.
Ah, so those minerals are actually good for us.
Research suggests they can have a big impact, especially on our cardiovascular health. For instance, the British Regional Heat Study analyzed data from 253 towns in the UK and found a strong correlation between water hardness and lower mortality rates from heart disease.
So the harder the water, the healthier the heart. Is that what you're saying?
In a way, yes. The study even pinpointed an ideal hardness level of around 170 milligrams per liter for optimal cardiovascular protection.
170 milligrams per liter, got it. But do we have any real-world examples of how this actually plays out? Because the statistics are interesting, but can we see this in action?
Oh, absolutely. There's a fascinating case study involving two towns in England, Scunthorpe and Grimsby. Initially, both had similar heart disease rates and equally hard water. But then Scunthorpe decided to soften its water supply.
So they remove those beneficial minerals we're talking about. I have a feeling this isn't going to end well.
You're right to be concerned. What's shocking is that after softening their water, Scunthorpe saw heart disease deaths jump by 25%. Meanwhile, Grimsby, which stuck with harder water, saw no such increase.
Wow, that's a pretty stark contrast. It definitely makes you think twice about those water softeners. I've been using one for years. But I guess if hard water is so good for us, why are so many people trying to get rid of it?
Well, you've experienced it yourself. Hard water can leave mineral deposits on fixtures and appliances. Some people find it affects the taste of water and even the lathering of soap, so there are definitely some inconveniences.
So it's a trade-off, I guess. Are you
Yeah.
suggesting we should all just embrace the hard water and deal with the downsides?
It's not about embracing inconvenience, but about understanding the bigger picture. Maybe instead of automatically softening our water, we could look into alternative solutions, like using specific cleaning products designed for hard water, or simply being more diligent about cleaning our fixtures. The National Academy of Sciences actually concluded that optimal water conditioning could reduce cardiovascular disease mortality by up to 15%.
15%, that's huge. Okay, so maybe those stains aren't so bad after all. Now, another thing that came up a lot, particularly when I was researching water softeners, was the concern about sodium in drinking water. Isn't sodium a major contributor to high blood pressure?
That's another area where misconceptions run rampant. You're right. Many organizations like the American Heart Association recommend limiting sodium intake from water.
Right, and that makes sense. But Dr. Fox's book presents a different perspective, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's crucial to understand that only about 10% of our total sodium intake comes from water. The vast majority, about 90%, actually comes from the food we eat.
So even if we're super careful about drinking low sodium water, it might not make a dent in our overall sodium intake if our diet is high in sodium.
Exactly. And numerous studies have actually shown no direct correlation between high sodium levels in drinking water and increased mortality rates. Some researchers, like Robinson, Schroeder, and Sauer, have even suggested that higher sodium levels in water could be linked to lower death rates. Of course, more research is needed, but it's definitely food for thought.
It's fascinating how all these things we think we know about water can be turned upside down when you really start digging into the research. It seems like instead of obsessing over sodium levels in our water, we should be way more concerned with the sodium content of our food.
I think that's a much more effective approach. While reducing overall salt intake is generally a good idea, demonizing sodium in water, especially when it makes up such a small percentage of our intake, is likely misdirected.
It seems like this deep dive is already shattering a lot of what I thought I knew about water. And speaking of challenging assumptions, what about all those fancy water purification methods that actually remove minerals from water? Aren't those supposed to be the healthiest option? I mean, pure water sounds pretty good, right?
That brings us to another big misconception. The idea that demineralized water, which is often produced through methods like distillation and reverse osmosis, is the purest and therefore the healthiest choice.
Oh, I've totally fallen for that marketing before.
Yeah.
But you're saying those minerals aren't just harmless, they're actually good for us.
Exactly. Dr. John Sorensen, a leading authority on mineral metabolism, has even stated that the minerals in drinking water are well absorbed and can even help our bodies excrete non-essential, potentially harmful elements. So instead of seeing them as impurities, we should view those minerals as potential allies for our health.
So those minerals are kind of like tiny filters,
Yeah.
helping our bodies get rid of unwanted stuff. I never thought about it that way.
Think of it like this hard water could act as a shield. Animal studies have shown that hard water can actually protect against the harmful effects of substances like lead, cadmium, chlorine, and fluoride.
Okay, this is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
I've been buying bottled water for years, thinking I was making the healthier choice. But now I'm starting to wonder, is bottled water always a safe bet?
That's a great question, and it leads us to yet another common misconception. The assumption that all bottled water is a healthy and safe alternative to tap water. While some bottled water is sourced from natural springs and contains those beneficial minerals we've been talking about, a large portion of it is simply processed water that's been purified through methods like reverse osmosis or distillation.
So it could be just like the demineralized water we were just talking about, stripped of all those valuable minerals.
Precisely. And in some cases, bottled water can even contain more contaminants than tap water. That's why it's so important to really scrutinize those labels. You want to look for bottled water that's naturally hard and has a moderate TDS level, ideally between 100 and 300 milligrams per liter.
TDS, you mean total dissolved solids, like all the minerals and other stuff in the water?
That's it. Don't hesitate to contact those bottled water companies and request a complete lab analysis to make sure you're getting a quality product. Remember, not all bottled water is created equal. Some might be just as processed as the tap water you're trying to avoid.
Wow, this is a lot to digest.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to be rethinking my bottled water purchases from now on. Okay, switching gears a bit here. What about the chlorine in our tap water? I mean, it's there to kill bacteria, so it must be safe, right?
It's a common assumption, but even substances used for disinfection can have unintended consequences.
Okay, now I'm getting nervous.
There's been some fascinating research on this. For example, Dr. Joseph Price found a possible link between chlorinated water and atherosclerosis in chickens.
Wait, are you saying the chlorine in our water could be linked to heart disease?
It's a complex issue and we need more research, but it's definitely something to consider. During the chlorination process, chlorine can react with organic matter in the water to form byproducts called trihalomethanes, or THMs.
THMs. Those don't sound good.
They shouldn't. Some THMs are known carcinogens. While the EPA does regulate THM levels in drinking water, there are still concerns about their potential long-term health effects. And it's important to remember that THMs are just one category of contaminants. There are countless other unidentified substances in our water that we're still learning about.
Okay, this is making me a little uneasy about drinking tap water, to be honest. Are there any alternatives to chlorination that might be safer?
Absolutely. Several alternative disinfection methods are gaining traction, including aeration, carbon filtration, ultraviolet light, and ozone. These methods can effectively disinfect water without introducing those potentially harmful chemicals.
Okay, that's good to know. So far, we've learned that hard water might actually be good for us. Sodium in water isn't as scary as we thought. Demineralized water might not be the best choice, and now we're questioning the safety of chlorine. I have to say, this deep dive is really challenging my preconceived notions about water. But before we move on, I want to make sure I'm following you correctly. Are you suggesting we should all stop softening our water and start drinking hard water, regardless of the source?
It's not about making blanket statements. The key takeaway is to be an informed consumer. Understand the complexities of water, research your local water supply, and consider the potential benefits and drawbacks of different purification methods. It's about finding what works best for you.
So it's all about being mindful and making choices that align with our individual needs and priorities.
Exactly. And remember, drinking water is just one piece of the puzzle. We also need to be aware of other pathways of exposure to potentially harmful substances in water. We're talking about things like skin absorption and inhalation.
Oh, right. You're saying that even if we're drinking filtered water, we could still be absorbing contaminants through our skin while showering or bathing.
And breathing them in, too.
Precisely. Our skin is actually our largest organ, and it's surprisingly permeable.
Right. I've heard that before, but never really connected it to water quality. It's a little unsettling to think that even if we're super careful about what we drink, we might still be at risk. But let's hold that thought for a moment. We'll delve deeper into those often overlooked pathways of skin absorption and inhalation and discuss some practical steps to mitigate those risks when we come back after a short break. So before the break, we were talking about skin absorption, and well, frankly, it kind of freaked me out a little to think that even if we're drinking the purest water, we could still be absorbing contaminants while showering is, well, unnerving. Yeah, it's definitely something we often overlook. We tend to focus so much on what we drink. But our skin, as our largest organ, is really quite porous. It's designed to absorb moisture, but that also means it can absorb other stuff that might be present in the water, including VOCs and other chemicals.
You mentioned that studies have shown that skin absorption can account for a significant portion of our exposure to VOCs, something like 64%. That's pretty alarming, especially when you think about how much time we spend showering and bathing.
Absolutely. It's definitely a pathway of exposure we shouldn't ignore.
So what can we do to, protect ourselves? Are there any practical steps we can take to minimize our exposure to contaminants through skin absorption?
Well, as we touched upon earlier, whole house filtration systems are really the most ideal solution. They filter all the water coming into your home, meaning that every tap, every shower head, even your appliances are dispensing clean, filtered water.
That sounds pretty amazing, but I imagine those systems can be pretty expensive. Are there any more affordable alternatives, for those of us who aren't made of money?
Of course. If a whole house system isn't feasible, shower filters are a fantastic option. They're specifically designed to remove chlorine, VOCs, and other contaminants from the water you're using in the shower.
So even if I can't filter all the water in my house, I can at least make sure the water I'm directly exposed to in the shower is clean. That's definitely reassuring.
Exactly. And by combining a shower filter with a tap water filter for drinking, you can achieve a pretty high level of protection without breaking the bank.
Okay, good to know. It's amazing how much I'm learning about this. I feel like I've been living under a rock.
It's not just about the water itself. We also need to be mindful of how we use water. For instance, taking long, hot showers can actually increase the amount of chlorine and other chemicals we absorb through our skin.
So shorter, cooler showers are better?
Yeah.
Good to know, especially during these hot summer months.
Exactly. And even simple things like using a fan while showering can help to ventilate the bathroom and reduce the concentration of airborne chemicals.
Wow, it's incredible how even these small changes can make a difference. It really is about taking a holistic approach, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not just filtering our water, but being mindful of how we're using it too.
Absolutely. It's about understanding the bigger picture and taking steps to minimize our exposure through all pathways, including drinking, showering, and even inhaling water vapor.
Speaking of inhalation,
Hmm.
we haven't talked much about that aspect yet. How significant is inhalation as a pathway of exposure?
Inhalation is often underestimated, but it can be a significant source of exposure, particularly for volatile chemicals like chlorine and THMs. When we shower or bathe, these chemicals can evaporate into the air and be inhaled.
So even if we have a shower filter, we could still potentially be inhaling some of those chemicals.
That's right. While a shower filter removes a lot of contaminants from the water, it won't eliminate the risk of inhalation entirely.
So what can we do to mitigate that risk? Besides taking shorter, cooler showers, of course.
Again, ventilation is key. Like we talked about earlier, running a fan during and after showering can help to clear the air of those volatile chemicals.
It's amazing how interconnected all of this is. I'm realizing there's just so much more to water quality than I ever imagined. It's not just about what we drink, it's about how we use water in every aspect of our lives.
That's a great way to put it. It's about understanding that water is a complex substance that interacts with our bodies in multiple ways. And by being informed consumers and making conscious choices, we can really take control of our health and well-being.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I feel like I'm finally starting to see the full picture when it comes to water quality. Before we wrap things up, are there any other key takeaways you'd like to emphasize for our listeners? It feels like this whole deep dive has been about busting myths left and right. Everything I thought I knew about water has been turned upside down. So as we wrap things up, what are some practical steps our listeners can take to make sure they're getting the best water possible? I think we could all use a little actionable advice after all this.
You're absolutely right. It can feel overwhelming, but the first step is awareness. Find out what's actually in your water. Many municipalities provide water quality reports online, or you can always reach out to your local water provider directly.
So do some research, find out what's coming out of my tap.
Got it.
What should we be looking for in those reports?
Pay close attention to things like the hardness levels, the mineral content, the pH, and whether there are any contaminants that are a cause for concern. Once you have a clear understanding of your water quality, you can start making informed decisions about filtration and other measures you might want to take.
You mentioned earlier that whole house filtration systems offer the most comprehensive protection. But are those always necessary? Are there situations where maybe just a shower filter and a tap water filter would be enough?
It really depends on your individual needs and priorities. If you're concerned about skin absorption and inhalation, a whole house system is definitely the gold standard. But if your main concern is the quality of your drinking water, then a shower filter paired with a tap water filter might be perfectly adequate.
Okay, that makes sense. But there's so many different types of water filters out there. How do we know which ones are actually effective? It can feel a little overwhelming trying to navigate all the options and marketing claims.
You're not wrong. There's a lot out there, and not all filters are created equal. It's crucial to do your research and look for filters that have been independently tested and certified to remove specific contaminants.
So read labels carefully and don't just believe the hype, right?
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask questions either. Contact those water filter companies and find out what their filters are designed to remove, what certifications they have. It's your health we're talking about. It's worth taking the time to make informed choices.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about water and its impact on our health. As we wrap up this deep dive, is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that water is absolutely vital, and it interacts with our bodies in ways that we often don't even think about. By being mindful and informed, by doing our research and making conscious choices, we can really take control of our health and well-being when it comes to water.
Absolutely. I encourage all of our listeners to continue exploring this topic and share what they've learned with their friends and family. After all, we all need water to survive, so let's make sure we're getting the best water possible. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay hydrated with the right kind of water, of course.